I'm Justin Biddle. I'm from Flint Technology, and this is
Jeremy from Lingo 24.
And we're going to be talking about... No, we won't do it together. It's a bit too much. It's a bit too... Yeah, it's not an excellent adventure or anything. We're going to talk about internationalizing your business. I'm going to start off by telling you what we're not going to be doing today. And when you walk out of this, you're not going to be able to go through 3 easy steps and start off your international business. This is much more about giving you some hints and tips about areas. You know, the message here, even before we start, is that to do this properly is hard, very hard. But and to illustrate sort of the conundrum, if you like, I'm going to tell you a little story about a fairly early client of ours at Flint, who came to me one day and he said, you know, I've been trying to, I want ideas for growing traffic, Justin. Can you give me some ideas? And I said, well, I've looked at your, at your marketing strategy and looked at your analytics, and it seems like you're not doing much PPC. And he said to me, well, I tried it once and it didn't work. And I said, I wanted to say to him, well, I wanted to grab him by the scruff of the neck and shake him around like a rag doll until he got some sense into his head. But what I actually said to him was, well, that could have been for one of 2 reasons. One, it doesn't work, as you've correctly concluded. In which case, God help all the big internationals that are doing this, and Asos, Net-a-Porter, and the rest of them that are doing this, and every other business that's doing it. Or it could be that you're not doing it right. So, I think the message here, from our point of view, is that what we want to do is give you some pointers, some of the hurdles and obstacles that you might face as you start to try, start thinking about how to address international markets. So let's get some objectives up first. The first question we really want to ask is, well, why would you want to go international at all? And to that, I have, what is it, 840 billion answers.
Yeah.
$840 billion was the size of the international e-commerce market in 2014. And it's growing pretty fast, as we know. We have the advantage in the UK of being ahead of the game, of being more sophisticated than almost all markets out there. Some would say all markets, which means that we, when we go to other international markets, that we may come off looking pretty smart. So I'm not going to dwell on why. What we're going to talk about are some of the essential challenges, and what we're going to introduce are some of the tools that you can use to overcome these challenges. And at the end, especially as we've only got 1 session rather than the 2, we're going to have as many questions as we can possibly get in there, and if we run out of questions, we'll have some planted in the audience.
All topics, fashion,
absolutely,
pizza.
Magento 2, whatever everyone wants to talk about. Starting off with what are the essential challenges. We've divided them into 2, and that's why there's 2 of us up here, really, and that we're going to cover off those 2 bits of the talk separately. The first challenge is engaging audiences in these different countries and territories. And I don't want to steal Jeremy's thunder here, but the message here is that different countries think and act differently, and we're going to show you some examples as to why that is. The second side, which I'm going to cover off a bit more, I'm from Flint, and we're an unashamedly techie and operational agency, is some of the operational challenges that you face when you start going international, and when you start doing it properly. And we're going to talk a little bit about warehousing and shipping, about taxes and duties, and of course about reporting and therefore managing. We have a saying that is, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, and that's as true for international business as it is obviously for your UK business. So at this stage, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you very much.
You have the conch.
Thank you. So there's obviously a lot of talk around content and how important that is in engaging customers. Obviously a very fragmented industry generally, lots of different ways to get to market, and that makes it quite tough. Obviously tough at home and tougher abroad. As Justin said, there's a lot of challenges involved in trying to be successful. But it's a big market, as Justin said again, $840 billion, I think growing exponentially. So how can you be successful? I think one of the key things is probably understanding your place in the market, and obviously not one strategy fits for every approach. So, whilst we say conversion depends on inspiration, actually it does depend really on what you're trying to do in terms of your product, where you sit in the market. And the marketplace model globally has been successful because it's based on a value proposition. So that's appropriate in that context. So there's a place for machine translation, definitely in testing environments, and also in terms of entering new markets, just to try them out and see what happens. But it's not a panacea. And if you try and use machine translation for all products, then ultimately that's not going to work and not going to fit. Also, culturally, there's a lot of differences in terms of the way that people engage with content. So you've got a lot of language sensitivity in, say, Japan and Germany, and less so in Spain. So again, you can have a twin strategy, because ultimately it's all about return on investment. Where can you spend your money most effectively to get the best return, and what language quality do you need to do that? So whether that's actually producing content at home or internationally, best practice has got to be to produce content in-house using your own team. I obviously work for Lingo 24, we're a translation technology company, but irrespective of what we do, if you can afford to have your own teams in-house, they're going to give you the best result. They understand the product, they understand the terminology, they understand the market. And whilst you can work with some very good vendors, they're never going to be able to understand all those elements. And again, that's why machine translation is such a difficult beast to use, because it can actually impact on your results. So certain markets are more open to English as a base language, Scandinavia, the Netherlands. But there's research to show that if you machine translate, you actually then reduce your conversions in those markets. They're much happier transacting in English, understanding what it is, than seeing a very poor translation. Another important aspect, and this isn't always easy to achieve, is things like imagery. And again, depending on which markets you're looking at, it's very important to be able to localize images, videos, because obviously you've got a small window to engage. I think I read something recently where it's down to 7.5 seconds, where you've got to grab the individual, get their attention, convert. Usually you're paying quite a lot of money to get them on your site in the first place. So if you've not got that bit right, obviously you've wasted the money. Be it PPC or SEO optimization, there's an investment in that. And every customer that comes in, obviously you're trying to maximize the return. So if you can, you want to be in a situation where you think about the content, and sometimes for international sites in particular, scale back. You don't need to translate all of your content. Maybe look at your top 10% of products. Maybe look at your higher margin products. Maybe look at microsites. So you can actually test the marketing activity and see if you can drive traffic effectively. And all these things allow you to test. And obviously the testing piece is the key part as well. So Optimizely, Meditate, all of these tools will allow you to do a testing mechanism so you can actually see what the returns is from the activity you've got. We had a customer that was happily trading in English across Europe, but they wanted to do some testing around translation. They translated one of their sites and they got a 250% uplift on conversion, which obviously is pretty powerful. The head of international there said it was the best test he'd ever seen in terms of influencing buyer decision. So if you do it right, you can have fantastic returns, but obviously what you don't want to do is be in a situation where you're sort of wasting money by targeting either the wrong customers or having the wrong content or the wrong user experience. So, all of those elements impact. I guess another thing to understand is around sort of brand saliency. If you're in a situation where you haven't got a value proposition, so you're not the cheapest in the market, how are you going to differentiate? And obviously content is a key way to differentiate. So if you're serious about local markets or international markets, your ability to actually have a point of difference and give those visitors something which is special and different is key. And again, you can't do that using machine translation. You can't actually do it with poor copy to begin with, because obviously if you've got poor copy and you're trying to go international, generally that's going to impact all areas. And actually, it doesn't cost that much to actually have a really good result in terms of the content. Because if you look at the nature of a site, static content actually is a very small proportion of what you're doing, but probably has the biggest impact in terms of those returns. And you can actually look at a twin strategy of translating static content and then for the minute leave product descriptions in the base language, and that's proven to have a really good results as well in terms of conversions. So moving on to sort of the whole user experience piece, obviously there's a broader context as well. Payment methods are critical in terms of the whole activity. If your customers can't pay for the products, then obviously, you know, I know it's blatantly obvious, they're not going to be able to convert. But that's obviously a big area. I think there's some like 23 different payment methods you need to cover off in order to cover all eventualities. So doing the research around the different markets and understanding how that works is really, really important as well. So the German market, for example, you've got very poor penetration of credit cards. They don't like to lend generally, and that's why credit cards don't work very well. And they've come from a catalogue background, so they buy lots of products, they try them on and they send them back, and they expect to pay in 30 days. So that they've got that window to try the products in safety and then return them again. So a few impacts there: return cycle, obviously cash flow, because you're pre-funding this activity, you're not seeing the cash via the payment gateway, and obviously the risk involved in that as well. So the German market's, you know, generally pretty tough, but it does give you a big opportunity because they tend to be very, very loyal. So going back to the content piece, there was a recent survey by Gartner. So they talked to a number of top retailers about where they saw the battle being, where would the success be won. Obviously, we've got lots of talk about the different points to connect with the customers, and you've got different strategies within that. But the key one for them was obviously content marketing and the ability to actually interact with your customer at the right point, give them what they want, and then engage them in that process. Be that social or another channel which we, you know, maybe don't even know about yet. It's really, really important that the content is appropriate. So again, as I say, you don't need to do everything on the site. You don't need to be in a situation where you try and replicate your entire process from the whole market. But what you need to do is think about what's going to give you the best return, how can you measure that return, and how can you support it, how can you scale it. So, you know, there's obviously elements within that around the technology piece, integrating the solution so you can actually feed content in and out easily within the platform, thinking about what Google is going to do in terms of the approach. You know, but just being in a situation where you put content at the forefront of what you're trying to achieve. And the content is not just written content, again, it's going back to the imagery in the video and all those elements. So I sort of touched on some of the cultural differences earlier and how that fit together in terms of buy-in cycle and engagement. And there was a big survey of engagement on site and buyers' habits generally. And as you expect, you know, it just wasn't content, it was also about the way that people interact, it's when they interact. So things like email marketing, which is appropriate for dot mailer. Open rates vary massively culturally in terms of which market you're hitting. So when you send these through, it's really important to think about that aspect. And I'm sure dot mailer have probably got quite a lot of research around those trends generally. And the open rate and then the click-through, obviously the key thing is they land on the right page, you've got the right profile in, you're segmenting your customers, and what you do for your home market, you replicate in the international markets as well. Sort of as an aside, I obviously mentioned the return and on-approval culture in Germany. Another thing which is interesting, I guess, generally is that the French have got a rule distinct to them for Europe. So there's an open European payment process. I'm sure you guys all know about that. But if you don't actually translate your terms and conditions into French, then your terms and conditions don't apply in France. And the standard French terms and conditions apply. So, you know, there's obviously risk involved in all the different markets. So it's really important to understand the differences when you're doing that. You know, and to translate your terms and conditions into French is a very small cost versus the risk of not doing that. So again, just thinking about what you've got to do, when you've got to do it, and how that fits together. Obviously, once you've sold the product, you've got another challenge, because obviously customer service internationally is difficult. There are some really, really good outsourced providers. A few of our customers are using a company in Southend, for example, covering all the major European languages 24/7, which is a great solution. There are some great machine translation solutions for user-generated content. So in that context, MT is great because it's real time. You know what sort of questions you're going to get. You know, how do I return it? It's the wrong size. My payment wasn't accepted. So you can actually standardize the machine translation engine. We've got a neat solution which allows you to actually route customer service emails directly via a machine translation engine back to your customer service team. So actually there's no work at all on your side. You can use English resource to man that, and then obviously use a template method to respond. There's a few different options around that. So again, it's just about understanding which bits fit together and what you need to do to be successful. I think it's back to you.
Already?
Yep, already, yeah.
Sorry, that was a bit louder than I was anticipating. We're We're going to move on now to some of the operational side to internationalizing. So when we get our clients, when we take them, start building their international businesses for them, one of the first things we come across, and they come across, is pricing. And I'm going to take a step back here actually, because when we talk about, when we try and describe why a site converts or doesn't convert, we look at it in terms of 4 different things. We look at it in terms of inspiration, which you've talked about in some detail, about how do you inspire the customer to make sure that they know that they're at the right place, feeling great about the purchase they're about to make. They know it's going to do the thing that they're expecting it to do. We talk about convenience. Am I showing the customer the right products at the right time, the right messages as well? Can I find the information I need to make my decision at the right time? We talk about trust. I mean, you talked about that as well. We talked about trust. Do I trust this retailer to deliver on their brand promise, whatever that particular brand promise may be? Again, it's the content side that delivers that. And then we talk about pricing. Obviously, if I can find, if all the other factors are equal and I can find something cheaper elsewhere, I will buy it elsewhere. If it's cheaper with you, I will buy it there. So for us, pricing is always a key conversion driver. And the key when you start taking your products and when you start taking your business internationally, is that price points differ across markets, and we had an example of a tights retailer that we worked with, where some of their brands, especially when it's going from UK to US, some of the brands that are sort of mid-range brands in the UK that they stock in the US have a much, much higher price point, and vice versa, of course, as well. And so what's the message here? The message here is that before you start, instead of just shoving a currency converter on there and sort of going for it, the more research you can do into the market in terms of pricing, in terms of competitors in those local markets, the better. And it comes back again to the same message again, is that who does this research? Who are the people who will understand these markets? It's about people. I can't think of a customer that is being successful internationally that we have that doesn't have either natives from those countries that they're trying to address in detail, or at least fluent speakers. And actually, when I did a straw poll with these customers, they said, one of them said, we did have a policy of hiring natives, but now we find that if we have the German team and the UK team, they all hang around in a gang, and it's now hard to get company culture right. So the knock-on effect is that by solving one problem, you've created another. So in terms of pricing, of course, Magento, as we know, has the ability to set up particular price lists. And you can set up an independent price list for a particular country, have a German store, and put the German price list up there. Then you get into the situation, of course, is that you've got to prevent arbitrage between the customer who's a bit savvy and says, oh, look, I can just go onto this site, flip across the different stores and work out which one's the cheapest one to get it at and buy it there. And for that, obviously what you need to do is put them into the correct store initially, and then, if necessary, keep them in that store. And again, I go back to this tights retailer. They had an additional problem, which again, not entirely pricing, but is that they only had the rights to sell specific brands in specific countries. So what they had to do was to get them into the right store and keep them in that particular store. And that is, as you start to, unless you are selling all own brand stuff, as you start to go international, this is a problem you'll probably face yourself as well. So that's where we get to preventing arbitrage. Then we get to the problem of, once you've got the sale and you've done the price and you've sold your order, is about what you do with the currency. And step one, obviously, again, when you're just doing a currency conversion and you're and you're actually converting into British pounds, you get the danger, which again is terrible for your brand, is that the amount that they put in their cart is not the amount that comes up on their credit card bill or whatever bill it may be. And that is a bad experience that, again, every brand who's tried it that we've had has seen conversion dip as a result of it. No, or should we say, so re-engagement conversion dip as a result of it. So now you're in the situation where, okay, we need to start having potentially different merchant accounts for these international stores as well. So, and that's the first step is that if you get a UK merchant account that can deal with, say, euros, that will convert back to euro. That will convert all your sales back into pounds, and then you'll get to the situation where this may not work particularly well with your reporting structures, because again, the amount you took in euros may not be the amount that comes back through your reconciliation route. We also have one merchant who's a furniture business based down on the south coast, who they actually start using forex traders as well, because they're buying in dollars in China. Most of their business is in Europe, and they are a UK company actually repatriating everything back in pounds. So what they do is they buy forward contracts in dollars and I think forward sales in euros, and hedge the whole system. This is only a £5 million business, but hedge the whole system. It saves them something in the region of about £40,000 a year in terms in currency fluctuations. So if you only have to be a £4 or £5 million business for this to make an awful lot of sense. I'm sure, I don't know, you Made.com have had similar sort of situations. So what have we got there? It's the key here is monitor pricing, start thinking about merchant accounts and what kind of merchant accounts you want in place. Start thinking about where you want your currency, what currencies you need at the end of it, and start planning the currencies you need at the end of it pretty much before you've made the sale. So, where are we? That's moving on a bit. We move into some of the operational challenges. And again, I'm going to start rather than sort of lecture, I'm going to tell you about some of our customers who have these challenges. We have a customer that has a very strong German business and a very strong UK business. And they have a warehouse out in Germany and a warehouse in the UK. They want to have the stock level in the German warehouse to be reflected on the German store, and the stock level in the UK warehouse to be reflected in the UK store. They're about to launch a French store, which means, and for that, they want the UK and the German store stock levels to be shown on the French store. Now, I'm sure you see the essential problem that's coming up here when you were talking about Magento, and that is that Magento doesn't, out of the box, support multiple stock levels for individual SKUs. So to achieve that, you have to put in place a multi-warehouse system for Magento. Now, again, from bitter experience, and actually from Maria over there has bitter experience, who's one of our project managers, by the way, we have been through quite a few of these different solutions, and there are a couple we would recommend, most highly, of course, our own. But this is the essential thing is that this is the change you're going to have to make. And when you make this change, again, if you're running two warehouses, I guarantee you won't be running Magento as your order management and inventory management system. So when you start running these two warehouses, you're going to have a proper order management system in place, and the integrations that you would have had with your order management as you launched warehouse number 2 is going to fall over too, and therefore need some fairly serious overhauls as well. Obviously at Flint, we've put these kind of solutions into operation. It's perfectly possible in Magento, but it's not easy. Again, back to our old message, is that going international is a huge opportunity, but none of this is easy. And just when we thought that was difficult, we're going to move on to the tax and duty side. And We've got DDP at the top, and that's actually the one that we most rarely see. In that, obviously, when you are shipping high-value goods and certainly specific goods with import duties into countries that are non-EC, you have to, you have one of two options. One, you just ship it, and you may, and the customer at the other end may get his goods with a bill to pay on for the duty as it comes in. Again, not a great customer experience. Or two, you pay duty up front. You have duty paid shipping, which is DDP. The second challenge you face, and this is very much an EU challenge, is that you are required to make an intrastat report, and even worse than that, I think it varies in different countries, it varies in different countries, but if you go over of sales of over £26,000, about 35,000 euros, I think that's about the lowest, in countries, you have to register for VAT in each of those countries. So you have a massive challenge here. And again, we're showing the problems. We're going to show you some of the solutions a little bit further down. But you have a massive challenge, just a reporting challenge to extricate all your European sales and make the relevant reports to the relevant agencies. There's a reason why you want to do this as well. And again, we're talking about a client that inadvertently went over the £26,000 German limit. They were required to, when it was uncovered by the revenue, they were required to pay the UK revenue and the German revenue, and it's taken them something in the region of 8 months to get back that money. I think that the total amount it's cost them was, again, this is the £6 million business that has a European, was the total amount they reckon it's cost them so far. It's about 80,000 euros, and that's, again, you can see why it's worthwhile getting it right. The next, and again, there's nothing here. I know we're slightly repeating ourselves. The next problem opportunity that you're going to face, and again, this is solved by the human factor, is one of customer support. For the customers that we have that have international businesses, they have local language speakers, and in fact, one of them has them all rostered, because it's mainly European countries, has them rostered to come in at particular times to deal with the different markets and the times that they wish those markets tend to trade. It's difficult. It works well if they're organised, but it's certainly not without its challenges. And the final issue we have that we've identified with, from an operational point of view, is one of returns. Especially if you have multiple warehouses, you now have multiple points, or if you don't have multiple warehouses, you have questions about where customers who wish to return, and we all know that the ability to easily return goods for online purchases is a critical decision, or is a critical factor in helping us decide whether we want to transact or not. The issue that they have, one of this metal garden furniture company, has particular challenges, obviously, because this stuff is very expensive to return. They offer free returns, and they take it back. They bring it all the way back to the UK. But again, it's something that really needs to be thought out up front. Again, remember that you're thinking about the customer lifetime value that you get from each sale you make, not about the individual margin that you might make on that transaction. So as a result, don't skimp on this, because all nations, every nation that we've looked at, that our customers have looked at, this is an important factor. Where are we? So now we're into the solutions. So you talked a lot about testing, and the two that you recommend, obviously, that you've used and we've used it quite a lot in detail, are Optimizely and Monetate. Obviously we're Lingo 24 and Flint here, so from the point of view of trying.
Oh, I think you have to go back one.
You skipped the...
Did I?
Yeah, go to conclusions rather than solutions.
Oh God, I was hoping to get away early. Here we go.
That's it.
Here we go. Testing.
Testing.
Monetate and Optimizely and a host of other solutions that can help you. Translation. Well, there was one person that we can really think of, one company, and that's Lingo 24.
Obviously.
And the reason why we're up here together is, we're going to have to say it, aren't we? We're going to have to blatantly plug our own product. Is at Flint we've built a plugin for Lingo 24 that will suck content out from a particular store, say your UK store, either apply machine translation or your
Human translation.
your human translation sort of hub to it, and push it back in to the appropriate store. So if it's going into German or Hindustani, you can go back into that particular store. It will cover off not only products, but categories, CMS pages. Anything else I've missed?
Pretty much everything. It's a very, very good plugin. Well done.
Absolutely, thank you very much. It's not like I've actually made it myself, so I feel fully qualified to talk about it. From the point of view of IP, the next thing we talked about was getting customers into that store and maybe keeping them in it or maybe not keeping them in it. And there are a couple of very good modules that do that we use. I think the one that we like the best is by a company called MajWorks with an X at the end. It's a fantastic little module, a little extension. It uses the MaxMind database, so it's pretty rich. You can map a bunch of a bunch of nations to one particular store. We're looking at it. Actually, we had a very interesting. I was going to add this when you were talking about imagery. An interesting meeting yesterday with a client who said, "I sell fashion gear, all right, and I'm trying to grow my American business, and I could put up one site for the American site, but on the East Coast it's cold, and on the West Coast it's bloody hot. So what do I put up?" So what they wanted us to do was actually have two separate US stores, one for the East Coast, one for the West Coast, or actually having a way of delivering different content to that East Coast and West Coast. Because in the US, it's both hot and cold. And you know what? When it's baking hot in LA, I don't really want to see about sort of Macs and thermals and vice versa. So that MajWorks store switcher is pretty good, and we've used it on pretty much on a range of different infrastructures to achieve both the put in store and, if necessary, keep in store. When we've talked about all this multi-store, multi-warehouse, and the requirement for order management and inventory management systems, I'm sure you guys know much. Dependent on your infrastructure and what you require, you have your integrations. I'm going to do a bit of plugging here. Sorry. At Flint, we have a platform called Interactions, which has an off-the-shelf integration for MMP's Order Active. It has Prima. It has Chaos Control, and as of in about 3 weeks' time, it will have Brightpearl as well. And all these will enable you to not only have to run discrete pricing in individuals in different websites, so to have proper price books for each location, but will also allow you to extend Magento. Actually, in most cases, I think there's one that isn't so far. Will support the Flint multi-warehouse extension as well. In terms of localized payment methods, which actually we kind of slightly skipped over, we haven't really talked about sort of Germans not liking the German penetration of credit cards, which is for online purchases less than 40%, whereas here we're about 65%, I believe, 70%. We haven't talked about how the French like checks still will want to pay by check. Which
Russians cash.
Yeah, well, Russians cash or
Yeah,
barrels of oil or something, whatever. So the ones that we recommend from the point of view for localized payment method are Wirecard and Klarna, which includes the Sofort system, and these will offer, I mean, for the German stores, I think it's Klarna that we've used for the 2 German stores, isn't it? That offers a range of different payment gateways that has seen uplifts on conversion of, significant uplifts in conversion. DDP calculation extensions. We've used a system called Duty Calculator, which now is, I think, owned by Pitney Bowes or whatever it is. But they have a nice little Magento plugin that synchronizes your product set with their listings for duties, and therefore charges it on checkout correctly. And for that all-important intrastat reporting tool, which is probably your accounts people's worst nightmare, we'd like to recommend a little company called Asquo. Here's the news here is that we didn't build the integration to Asquo; they built their own one. So we're not plugging any of our own products here for once. It's actually a bit like a Metria, a nice little reporting system. But what we've used it for 2 of our international customers now is they've developed some specific intrastat reports that just spit the whole thing out in a nice compliant manner. Saves, I think both clients said it saves them something in the region of 2 days a month. And for £400, I think they said for £400 that was pretty good value. So, conclusions. And they're not really very different to the ones we started with here. Just setting up a local store with a local currency converted from base is unlikely to inspire high conversion. It's going to be like my mate when he's talking about PPC. He said, well, if you do that, your conclusion will be, this international stuff, it doesn't seem to work. These local stores require local marketing, local effort, local content, local thought about what the weather conditions are going to be, local holidays, local flavour, and localized infrastructure to support them. And as we get to that localized infrastructure, I hope we've offered some solutions here to some of the problems that we've identified. But if you want to deliver your brand promise, if you want to say, I can get this to you tomorrow, and you can return it hassle-free, and it will be exactly as it says on the box, and it will be priced correctly, and I'm not being ripped off, then having this kind of operational infrastructure in place is absolutely key. And those are some. I hope we've given you some of the ways that you can deliver that. Are there any questions? That we're done. I don't think we've got anything else to plug, have we?
Modeling
yes,
careers.
Mitch.
With Magento 2, does any of that change the Magento 2? Does that handle multi-warehouse now? Does that...
No. No, it doesn't.
Whether or not any of the stuff that you'd apply to has...
The truth is that for everything, the truth is that quite a lot of these solutions don't exist in Magento 2 yet. And maybe I don't know, for a shorter time, we were in a nice little open house on what the hell Magento 2 does and doesn't do, and what we all think about Magento 2 might be a good idea. But the issue we have here, and when we're talking to clients, which I'm sure all the people, all the agencies, and well, pretty much everyone here is talking about it. The key issue we have here is that we'd all love to be launching into Magento 2 tomorrow, but if the extensions don't exist for us in Magento 2, the sort of value we can deliver to our customers is distinctly lower, and the sort of risk that these projects might have is distinctly higher. So at the moment, no, it doesn't have multi-warehouse, and no, none of our integrations to order management platforms work in Magento 2 yet, and no, there aren't any bloody payment gateways for Magento 2 yet, apart from the ones that ship with Magento, apart from one for Verifone that will be coming out in just a few weeks' time. Again, by Flint Technology.
You missed that one.
Sorry, I did. There was something I hadn't plugged. I'm so sorry. So what we're saying to our customers at the moment as regards Magento 2, I think this is still the question, but if it's not, I'm still going to waffle on anyway, is that it's pretty much too early to tell yet, if you're an international business, whether the risk is worth it right now. Until we see things like proper integrations, scalable integrations to order management platforms, until we see the payment gateways that are specific to those international stores in place, until we see some of the reporting tools, and I know we've got .mailer in there, so that's a definite start. Some of the email marketing tools as well. But until we see these things, how can we recommend Magento 2 as a reasonably risk return balance option? Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
I always say that well, there's nothing that can't be said in a short time that can't be said equally well in a very long time. Any other questions?
Which shipment extensions are you using for international customers?
From our point of view, whether or not they're international, we use the same shipping plug. From our point of view, for our international customers, there's two aspects to the shipping problem. The first question is, what do I charge the customer? And for that, we're using exactly the same extensions that we use for UK-based businesses. We use the web shop apps ones like everyone else does. I mean, something that gives us ultimate flexibility. The next quandary, again for these international businesses, what's the most efficient way for me to actually convert on that brand promise that I promised them? If I promise them next day, or I promise them, in 4 hours time, or whatever it is, how am I going to do that? And normally what has happened for us, because international businesses for us use order management platforms, that decision is made at the order management platform. So it's the integrations that will integrate with the order management platform that will determine how the shipping happens. If for some reason you're trying to run an international business with just a Magento on its own, plug in NetDispatch, Scurry, Metapack, any of those will offer slightly different but equally valid solutions. Does that answer your question?